I knew something was off the moment his hand lingered too long on my shoulder. Growing up in Los Angeles, I never thought my life would turn into something out of a psychological thriller. I was raised by my mother, a strong woman who did everything to give me a good life. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I had everything I needed: a good education, a warm home, and a mother who loved me more than anything in the world. Then came Richard. My mom met him 2 years ago, and they got married last summer. He was charming, successful, and more importantly, he made my mother happy. I wanted to be happy for her too. I really did. But something about Richard never sat right with me. At first it was just small things, casual comments about how I looked, how I dressed. He'd say things like, "Bella, you've grown into such a stunning young woman. If I were younger." I always brushed it off, thinking he was just being friendly. Maybe a little too friendly, but nothing alarming. Then the touches started. Subtle at first. A hand on my lower back, a lingering touch on my arm. Too long, too familiar. My gut told me it wasn't normal, but I didn't know how to say it out loud. How could I tell my mom? She was in love with him. She saw him as the perfect husband, the man who saved her from loneliness. One evening I was sitting in the living room, flipping through my phone when Richard walked in. Mom was out grocery shopping. He sat down next to me on the couch, way too close. "You've been avoiding me, Bella," he said with a smirk. I forced a laugh. "I've just been busy." He tilted his head. "You know, you don't have to be so distant. We're family now. You can talk to me about anything." His hand brushed my knee. I felt my whole body tense up. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I swallowed hard and forced myself to stand up. I have to finish some work." I rushed to my room and locked the door. My fingers were shaking as I typed out a message to my best friend Emily. "I think my stepdad is creeping me out." Seconds later she called. "What happened?" I told her everything. The lingering touches, the weird comments. She was silent for a moment before saying, "Bella, you need to tell your mom." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "And say what? That her husband is a creep?" She'd never believe me. Emily exhaled loudly. "Then tell someone else. Anyone. You can't let this go on." I didn't respond, because deep down I wasn't sure what scared me more: Richard or the possibility that my mother might not believe me. That night I tried to avoid him. I ate dinner quickly and excused myself, but just as I was heading to my room, Richard called out, "Bella, can we talk?" I turned around slowly. Mom was washing dishes in the kitchen, out of earshot. "What's wrong?" I asked cautiously. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes that made my stomach churn. "I just want to clear the air. I feel like you don't trust me, and that hurts. I only want the best for you." I folded my arms, trying to stand my ground. "Infine, Richard." He took a step closer. Too close. My back pressed against the wall. "You know you can talk to me about anything. We're family." His voice was soft, but the way he was looking at me made my skin crawl. I forced a smile and slipped past him. "Good night, Richard." I barely slept that night. The next morning I decided I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. But as I walked into the kitchen, ready to talk to my mom, she was smiling, humming as she poured coffee. "Richard is planning a surprise trip for us next month. Can you believe it?" She beamed. My stomach dropped. How could I tell her? How could I ruin her happiness? I forced a smile. "That's great, Mom." But inside I felt like I was drowning. I spent the next few days trapped in a whirlwind of anxiety. Every time I was alone in the house with Richard, I felt my skin crawl. I started keeping my door locked at all times, pretending to be busy with work or school just to avoid him. But avoidance wasn't enough. He started getting bolder. One evening I was coming out of the bathroom when I nearly ran into him in the hallway. My heart jumped into my throat. "Oh, Bella," he said with a smirk. "Didn't mean to scare you." I stepped back instinctively. "It's fine," I muttered, trying to move past him. But he didn't move. "You've been avoiding me," he said again, just like before. "Did I do something to upset you?" I could feel the wall against my back again. I hated how small he made me feel. "No," I said quickly. "I've just been busy." He tilted his head. "You know, you don't have to be so distant. We're family." That word again. Family. It sounded so wrong coming from his mouth. I should go, I said, forcing a nervous smile. I slipped past him and rushed to my room, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking. I needed to get out of this house. That night I called Emily again. Bella, you need to tell someone. This is serious, she said firmly. And say what? That my stepdad is making me uncomfortable. I sighed. There's no proof, Emily. Just a feeling. He hasn't actually. Not yet, she cut me off. But he will. People like that always escalate. You can't just wait for it to happen. I swallowed hard. I knew she was right. The next morning, I told my mom I was going to stay with Emily for the weekend. She didn't question it. She just smiled and told me to have fun. Richard was watching me the whole time. We'll miss you around here, he said, his voice smooth and casual. But his eyes told a different story. I forced a smile and left as quickly as I could. At Emily's place, I finally felt like I could breathe. You can stay as long as you need, she said as we sat on her bed eating takeout. But Bella, you know you can't avoid this forever. I nodded. I know. She hesitated before speaking again. You could tell the police. I laughed bitterly. And say what? That my stepdad gives me bad vibes? That he stands too close? Emily sighed. I just don't want you to wait until it's too late. Neither did I. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I couldn't keep this secret any longer. I had to tell my mom, but I had no idea how. I barely slept that night. No matter how many times I tossed and turned, I couldn't shut my brain off. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt his hand on my knee, his voice too close, his stare lingering too long. Emily was right. I couldn't wait until it was too late. But what if my mom didn't believe me? That was the question I kept coming back to, the fear that gripped my stomach in a vice. She loved Richard. She saw him as the man who saved her, the man who stepped in when she felt alone. How could I take that away from her? And what if she thought I was exaggerating? Or worse, what if she thought I was lying? I took a deep breath, staring at my phone. I knew I couldn't do this over a call. I had to see her in person. I'm going home, I told Emily the next morning. She frowned. Are you sure? You can stay here as long as you need. I know, but I need to talk to my mom. Emily hesitated before nodding. Promise me you'll call me if anything happens. I promise. The drive back home felt like an eternity. Every turn, every red light, I rehearsed what I would say. I tried to find the right words, but none of them felt right. When I finally pulled into the driveway, my stomach twisted. I stepped inside, half expecting Richard to be there, waiting. But the house was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard my mom's voice from the kitchen. She was on the phone, laughing softly. I walked in and saw her leaning against the counter, a coffee mug in hand. Oh, Bella, you're back, she smiled, setting her phone down. I swallowed hard. Mom, can we talk? Her expression shifted immediately. Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. It's about Richard. The smile faded from her face. What about him? She asked cautiously. I hesitated. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. He makes me uncomfortable, Mom. My voice was barely above a whisper. She frowned. What do you mean? I forced myself to look her in the eyes. He touches me too much. He stands too close. He says things that don't feel right. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a brief second I saw something in her expression: doubt? Fear. Bella. Richard loves you like a daughter. He would never do anything to hurt you. My heart sank. Asterisk, Mom, please. I know what I'm saying. He waits until you're not around. He's been getting bolder. And I swallowed hard. I'm scared. She shook her head, pressing her fingers to her temple. No, that doesn't make sense. He's been nothing but good to us. To you, I corrected her. But you don't see how he is when you're not around. Her face twisted, like she was trying to make sense of something that didn't fit into her reality. Are you sure you're not misinterpreting things? She asked, her voice softer, almost pleading. I felt something inside me crack. Mom. I forced back tears. I need you to believe me. She looked at me, really looked at me, and something in her expression shifted. I saw hesitation, fear, and maybe something else. Bella, this is a serious accusation, she whispered. I know. My voice broke, but I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. For a moment she was silent. Then, before she could say anything else, we both heard the front door open. Richard was home. I felt my entire body stiffen as his footsteps approached. Hey ladies, he called out casually, setting his keys down on the counter. He smiled at my mom, then turned to me. Bella, you're back. I forced myself to hold his gaze, but my hands were shaking at my sides. My mom cleared her throat. Richard, we need to talk. His eyes flickered to me for a fraction of a second before he smiled again. Of course. What's going on? She hesitated, glancing between us. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the war she was fighting within herself. Richard tilted his head. You okay, sweetheart? He asked her. The way he said it made my skin crawl. He was already trying to manipulate her to make her doubt me. Bella told me something concerning, my mom said finally, her voice unsteady. She says you've been acting inappropriately toward her. Richard's expression didn't even flicker. He let out a small chuckle and shook his head. Wow, he said, running a hand through his hair. That's really shocking to hear. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. Bella, sweetheart, is this some kind of misunderstanding? I clenched my fists. No, it's not. He sighed heavily and turned back to my mom. I would never do anything to hurt her. You know that, don't you? My mom looked at him, then at me. I could see it. The struggle. The doubt. She loved him. She wanted to believe him. But she also loved me. I don't know what to think, she whispered. I felt my heart shatter. Richard stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. Honey, I would never. Don't touch her. I snapped before I could stop myself. For the first time, Richard's expression cracked. It was subtle, but I saw it. A flicker of anger. A flash of something dark. He recovered quickly, letting out a slow breath. Okay, he said. I think we all just need to calm down. I could see what he was doing. Playing the reasonable one. The victim. I wasn't going to let him win. Mom, I said, my voice shaking. I don't feel safe around him. She looked at me again, and this time, something in her face changed. She saw me. Really saw me. She took a slow breath, then turned to Richard. I think you should leave for a while, she said. Richard's eyes widened slightly. What? I need time to think, she said firmly. Bella needs space. For a moment, I thought he might argue. But then he nodded slowly, his jaw tight. Of course, he said smoothly. If that's what you need. But as he walked past me, I felt the weight of his gaze. This wasn't over. I knew it. And I had a feeling he did too. For the first time in weeks, I could finally breathe. Richard was gone. At least for now. But I wasn't naive enough to think this was the end. After he left, my mom sat in silence for a long time. She kept staring at the floor, her fingers trembling around the coffee mug in her hands. I wanted to believe that she had made her choice, that she had chosen me. But I could see the doubt eating away at her. Mom, I said carefully. Are you okay? She let out a shaky breath. I never saw any signs, Bella. He's always been so good to us. Because he wanted you to think that, I told her. Mom, I wouldn't lie about something like this. She nodded, but I could tell she was still struggling. I just need time to process everything, she whispered. It's a lot. I understood. But the problem was time wasn't on our side. That night I lay awake in bed, every muscle in my body tense. I knew Richard wouldn't just accept what happened. He had spent too much time controlling the situation, keeping my mom wrapped around his finger. He wasn't going to let that go so easily. And I was right. At 2 a.m. my phone buzzed. I reached for it, heart pounding. It was a text. Richard, we need to talk, Bella. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. A second message came through. Richard, I think you've misunderstood a lot of things. Let's meet and clear this up. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Every part of me screamed, don't respond. But I needed proof. I took a deep breath and typed back. There's nothing to talk about. 3 dots appeared. He was typing. Then they disappeared. I waited. Nothing. I put my phone down, forcing myself to stay calm. But I knew deep down this wasn't over. The next morning I woke up to find my mom sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red and puffy. "I called Richard this morning," she said softly. I froze. "Mom, I told him not to come back," she interrupted, looking up at me. "At least for now." A wave of relief washed over me. "Thank you," I whispered. She gave me a small sad smile. "I still don't know what to believe, Bella, but I know you wouldn't lie to me. And if you don't feel safe, then that's enough." It wasn't the full acceptance I wanted, but it was something. "I think we should talk to the police," I said. She hesitated. "Do you really think that's necessary?" "Yes, because I knew Richard wasn't done with us yet." We went to the police station that afternoon. I told them everything, how he had been acting, the things he had said, the way he always found reasons to be near me when my mom wasn't around. I even showed them the text messages. The officer listened carefully, nodding. "Has he ever physically hurt you?" I shook my head. "No. But I think he was building up to something." The officer sighed. "Unfortunately, without concrete evidence, there's not much we can do right now. But we can file a report and issue a formal warning." It wasn't what I wanted. I wanted him gone permanently. But it was a start. That evening, as I was sitting in my room, my phone buzzed again. A call. No caller ID. I didn't answer. A few seconds later, a voicemail popped up. I hesitated before pressing play. Richard's voice came through low and calm. "You think you've won, Bella? You haven't. Your mom still loves me. She always will. And sooner or later, she'll see the truth. You're just a scared little girl who overreacted. And when she realizes that, I'll be back. You can't get rid of me." I felt like I was going to be sick. I ran downstairs, shoving my phone into my mom's hands. "Listen to this," I demanded. She pressed play. As soon as she heard his voice, her face paled. But as the message continued, I saw something shift in her. A flicker of anger. When the voicemail ended, she stood up, grabbing her keys. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To the police," she said. "I should have believed you the first time." With the voicemail as evidence, the police took things more seriously. They issued a restraining order against Richard. If he came near us again, he'd be arrested. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. But the damage had already been done. My mom cried for days. She blamed herself over and over. "I should have seen it," she kept saying. "I should have protected you." I hugged her tightly. "You did. You believed me when it mattered." And that was the truth. A month later, Richard was officially out of our lives. He tried calling my mom a few times, but she blocked his number. We changed the locks on the house. I finally felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't easy. My mom had to grieve the relationship she thought she had. I had to deal with the nightmares, the anxiety that crept in when I least expected it. But we were healing, one step at a time. And no matter what happened next, I knew one thing for sure: Richard would never control our lives again.